McDonald. We'll move to question time. Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. Does Australia need to increase gas production to meet export and domestic demand while lowering gas prices?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank the Senator for her question and her interest in this topic, of course. The important thing, I think, about particularly the Safeguards Bill, but the issue of ongoing supply of gas is that we are moving to transition out of fossil fuels and into renewable fuels. In fact, you'll have heard the Prime Minister say this week that he wants Australia to be a renewable superpower, a renewable energy superpower.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator McDonald.
Thank you. On relevance, I had specifically asked about whether or not Australia needs to increase its gas production.
Yes, thank you. I will direct the Minister to your question. Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. So the really difficult thing here, Senator, is that you've got to ensure there's ongoing investment in gas production, particularly in this country, while you do that transition to renewables. Now, what might that transition look like? Well, it might be hydrogen. As you know, the South Australian government is leading the way.
Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator McDonald.
President, I don't have much time. Specifically on relevance, does Australia need to increase its gas production?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. The Minister is being relevant to your question. Thank you, Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And if you could just let me finish what I'm talking. Well, you might call it waffle, but it's an important issue because to get that transition from fossil fuel to renewable fuel, we have to ensure that there's continued investment in coal and gas, and it's the objective of this government to ensure that we.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McDonald, first supplementary.
I'm going to have another go. By how much does Australia need to increase gas production to meet export and domestic demand while lowering gas prices?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank the Senator for her first supplementary question. Of course, between 2014 and 2021, East Coast gas production increased by 300%, and that's, of course, despite problems like access to the Narrabri gas supplies. Despite supply going up significantly, the prices paid by Australian households and Australian industry also went up by 420% in real terms. Yeah, 420%, Senator Pratt, over that same period of time. The former government, that's the government that you were.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator McDonald.
President, on relevance, what is the increase that is required?
The Minister is addressing your question. I'll refer him to the latter part of your question, which was about prices. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Now, the former government was warned on at least a dozen. Well, you can't understand.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McDonald, second supplementary.
Given the ACCC and the Australian Energy Market Operator have identified a need to increase gas production, what government policies, inclusive of the proposed safeguard mechanism, will deliver the required increase in gas production?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Farrell.
Well, in my first answer, Senator, thank you, President, for that, and thank the Senator for her second supplementary question. I've explained to you in my first answer, Senator, that the trick here is to ensure that there's sufficient investment in gas and coal to allow for the whole of government,
Minister, please resume your seat. I have a Senator, Minister Farrell. Minister Farrell, resume your seat. Resume your seat. I have a senator on her feet, Senator McDonald.
President, no tricks. What is the government's policies to provide for increased gas production?
Thank you, Senator McDonald, and I'll again draw the minister to your question. Minister Farrell.
So, thank you, President. Unlike the former government, we've got a rounded policy to ensure, firstly, that we secure our electricity supplies in this country, including putting down, as I've spoken many times, including putting downward pressure on electricity prices, but ensuring that all of our investment policies are directed to making that transition that even
Thank
your
you,
government...
Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister update the Senate on the progress that the Albanese government has made in taking the country forward on climate action?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Grogan for the question and also for her strong advocacy in the area of climate policy over many years. At the last election, the Australian people voted undeniably for action on climate change. The Albanese government has a mandate to deliver this climate action, and I welcome the fact that we have been able to secure additional parliamentary support for the Safeguard Mechanism reforms. After a decade of inaction from those opposite, that's right, they created the problem, hid the problem and then opposed to any solutions. Correct. After a decade of inaction, we can finally put Australia on a credible path to achieve net zero by 2050. Just remember that those opposite agree with net zero by 2050. They just can't agree with any credible path to get there. The Safeguard Mechanism, as agreed by a majority of this chamber later this week, and we are deeply appreciative of the work that has gone in from crossbench members in working with us, including the Greens Party and Senator Pocock, Senators Lambie, Tyrrell and Senator Thorpe, who have worked collegiately, as is required by this chamber, to land in a sensible outcome. And it really is for those opposite to explain why they dealt themselves out at the earliest opportunity without even having a discussion. This passage of the Safeguards Mechanism Bill will allow policy certainty for the first time after 22 failed energy policies, announced 22, couldn't deliver one of them. Business and investors have been after this policy certainty for some time. The jobs, the new industries and the opportunities that will come from having a credible path to net zero should not be underestimated by this chamber, and I thank those who have engaged willingly with the government on these negotiations.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
That's great news, Minister. Great news. Can the Minister now update the Senate on the importance of the reforms to the Safeguard Mechanism to new facilities?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Gallagher.
And I thank Senator Grogan for the question. The Safeguard Mechanism reforms are about strengthening the economy and ensuring industry can compete in a decarbonising world. These are landmark reforms that will reduce 205 million tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions to 2030. Those emissions reduction will be delivered even with new facilities. Under the reform safeguard mechanisms, new facilities will need to meet international best practice. They will need to ensure emissions decline over time. New gas fields supplying existing liquefied natural gas facilities will be treated as new facilities. And with respect to the Beetaloo Basin, the Albanese government is committed to working with the Northern Territory Government to implement Recommendation 9.8 of the Pepper Inquiry. The Safeguard Framework will help deliver the commitment to Scope 1 emissions, and given the cross-jurisdictional nature of Scope 2 and 3 emissions, the government will refer Scope 2 and 3 emissions to the Energy and Climate Ministerial Council.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister tell us what the reaction has been from business, climate and industry groups to the confirmation of parliamentary support for the Safeguard Reform Mechanism?
Thank you, Senator. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Grogan for the supplementary. And yes, I can. Support from senators to help that pass the Safeguard Mechanism reforms has been widely welcome, from the Australian Conservation Foundation to the Australian Industry Group and the Climate Council and the Business Council. The Business Council said these reforms were tough but achievable, and we think that's right. We have a policy which is ambitious but achievable, and the work that has gone into getting that balance right and seeking support from this chamber has been considerable. Mr Innes Wilcox of the Australian Industry Group said that industry will view the announced deal with some relief that pragmatism and reasonable compromise have prevailed. Now business and government have to get on with the large task of implementing this reform and supporting transformative investments in industry. Sensible response to good, sensible policy reform that those opposite have rejected and disengaged from for over a decade now.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Duniam.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. The Greens yesterday stated that their deal on the Safeguard Mechanism has, quote, secured a pollution trigger for the first time in history on climate pollution. Can the Minister confirm that the government has agreed to adopt this climate trigger?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Duniam for his question. And of course, I can let the Greens speak for themselves on their side of the agreement. What I want to do is recognise the support that this agreement has got, both from conservation groups all the way to business groups. Just to give one example, Jennifer Westacott from the Business Council. Business welcomes progress towards ending the impasse.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Duniam.
President, it wouldn't surprise you to know I'm about to take a point of order on direct relevance, and while I'm appreciative of all the glowing endorsements he seems to have manufactured, I asked a specific question. Can I have an answer, please?
Thank you. You asked particularly about the Greens' position on a number of matters, and the minister has been relevant to that. Senator Birmingham.
On the point of order in your ruling, President, Senator Duniam did not ask about the Greens' position. The question he asked was, can the minister confirm that the government has agreed to adopt this climate trigger?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. The question started with the Greens. It went to safeguard mechanisms, it went to climate pollution and a climate trigger, and then it asked the government's position. I believe the minister is being relevant. I will continue to listen carefully, and if not, I will draw him to the question. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. What I can say is that we're not amending the EPBC Act. What we're doing is saying that when a project is approved under the EPBC Act, their emissions will be assessed against the Safeguard Mechanism targets. The two processes remain completely separate. It's about sensibly sharing relevant information to the Safeguards Mechanism scheme. The scheme does not give scope to the minister to reverse environmental approvals, and while the government already has accountability through the annual climate change statement, we're happy to add additional transparency and accountability to make sure the intention of the reforms are met. And I might add, I mentioned Jennifer Westacott, the AI group made a comment about this deal that you don't like, Senator Duniam. He says he says it's a good deal. Innes Wilcox says it's a good deal. The treatment. No.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. On the 3rd of August last year, the Prime Minister and the Minister Bowen were asked at a press conference if they would agree to the Greens' demands to use the safeguard mechanism to stop certain coal and gas projects. The Prime Minister's response was, quote, "No," in a word. Minister, why did the Prime Minister say one thing about this issue and then do completely the opposite?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Duniam for his first question. First supplementary question. The opposition have only got themselves to blame for the position that they now find themselves in. They purport to be a party of government. They went to the last election with a policy of net zero by 2050. We're progressing that because we also took that policy to the people. We're progressing that, and at every point in the process, the opposition is opposed to trying to deal with this issue of decarbonising our economy. We haven't heard a single word from the opposition about how they intend to decarbonise the economy.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Duniam, second supplementary.
Indeed. Thank you, President. On the 6th of September 2021, Mr Albanese said that if the Labor Party won office at the next federal election, quote, "We will be supporting our own policies going forward at the election. We won't be in a circumstance whereby any minor party tells us what to do." In signing up to a dirty deal with the Greens on the safeguard mechanism, why has the Albanese government once again broken a promise that Mr Albanese made directly to the Australian people? Why?
Order. Minister Gallagher. Order. Minister Farrell.
Full of questions now.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Duniam for his second supplementary question. Now, look, last week we had the opportunity to deal with the referendum machinery bill, and to the credit of Senator Hume, the leader, Mr Dutton, you engaged in that process. And as a result, you were participants in that process. Now, what you haven't done—
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Duniam.
President, direct relevance. I asked him why they broke a promise. Could he tell us why?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. I will direct the minister to your whole question. Minister.
Thank you, President. Now, you had an opportunity. You had an opportunity this week. You had an opportunity this week to engage in the process. You took the decision. To deal yourself out of that process, and if you continue to do that, for the rest of the term, you will be even more irrelevant than you are right now.
Minister Farrell, the time has expired. Order on both sides of the chamber. Order. Senator Rice.
Thank you, President. My question is to Senator Watt, the Minister for Agriculture and Forestry. Firstly, I seek leave to table a photo of a Tasmanian devil that was burnt to death in a post-logging fire. That is a deliberate fire that burns what remains of native forest after logging.
Thank you, Senator Rice. I'll see if leave is granted. Generally, and this was explained to the chamber last week, generally material is circulated. If you want to circulate it, I'm assuming the minister will make a decision later.
Yep.
Thank you. Please ask your question.
Minister, Tasmanian devils are endangered, and yet logging operations signed off by your government are killing Tasmanian devils and destroying devil habitat. Minister, is this good enough, that this destruction of these endangered species are happening under your watch?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Rice. Well, of course, I can't comment on that particular issue, having not been given the courtesy of being provided with those documents before the question was asked. But what I can say is that the Albanese government supports a sustainable forestry industry, as I have said on a number of occasions. You well know, Senator Rice, that the forests in Tasmania are managed under joint state and federal regional forestry agreements, and that is the system that has been in place for a very long time. It is underpinned by strong environmental standards, and when those standards are not met, then appropriate action is taken for environmental protection reasons. Now, as I say, I can't comment on the particular issues that you've raised because you haven't raised them with me before, but we do recognise that it is important that we have a forestry industry in Australia that is environmentally sustainable. It's one of the reasons why our government went to the election making a significant commitment to expand the forest plantation estate. In fact, as you may be aware, Senator Rice, already about 87% of the logs harvested in Australia are from plantation estates, rather than with the remainder being from native forests. And we do think that it's important to have strong environmental standards that sit beneath those regional forestry agreements, and that is a position that we will continue to take. You would have seen that in response to the Samuels review, Minister Plibersek made the point that the new national environmental standards will apply to RFAs. That position was not just accepted but welcomed by the forestry industry associations, in addition to environmental organisations, and I think that shows that the Albanese government gets the balance right between ensuring that we can meet our timber needs while also protecting the environment.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Rice, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, your so-called sustainable forestry is clearly unsustainable. It's abundantly clear that in Tasmania, in Victoria, in New South Wales and WA, that logging our native forests is hurtling our threatened wildlife towards extinction, cremating Tasmanian devils in post-logging burns, destroying habitat of swift parrots, leadbeater's possums, greater gliders. Minister, why won't you end the regional forest agreements that allow this destructive logging?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Rice, for sharing your opinions with us. But as I say, Labor will always support a sustainable forestry industry. We do want sustainable forestry jobs. We need, as a society, we do continue to rely on timber-based products. The jobs that the forestry industry creates, particularly in regional Australia, including in Tasmania, are important to regional economies. But forests are also valuable for their carbon storage, their native habitats, and we understand that we do need strong environmental protections that sit beneath our forestry industry. As I said, only in last December, Minister Plibersek announced our government's plan to reform Australia's environmental laws because those laws are broken. Graham Samuel found as much in his review that was commissioned by the former government. Those laws don't protect our environment and they're frustrating for business to negotiate. And that's why new environmental standards will apply to RFAs as they will to many other aspects
Senator
of business.
Rice, second supplementary.
Thanks, Minister. Minister, does your so-called sustainable forestry include allowing endangered species to be killed? If not, and given you won't end native forest logging, what are you going to do to ensure that Tasmanian devils and other precious wildlife are protected and not being killed in logging operations?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Thanks, Senator Rice. Well, as we have come to understand from the Greens, they always insist on action to occur yesterday without thinking about the consequences. The Greens have no plan we haven't heard Senator Rice or anyone from the Greens tell us where we would obtain timber products that we would need if we were to abolish native forestry immediately in the way that she calls for. We haven't had any word from the Greens about where the jobs would come from to replace the jobs abolished, but that's okay because the Greens never have to think about these things. They're not a party of government. They can go out there and make outlandish claims that do not well, there's a couple of parties who are definitely not part of the government over there, and we hope to keep it that way for a very long time. But the Greens don't have to think about these issues. What Labor is trying to do as a party of government is get the balance right between ensuring we have the timber that we need, ensuring that regional communities are supported by jobs, while also having strong environmental protections in place.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Yesterday, the Minister outlined how the former government's tricky approach to budgeting has put several government programs and services at risk after July 1. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the former coalition government's budget would have impacted the national institutions here in the capital, which house and protect our national stories and culture?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for her question and, again, for her support for important national cultural institutions here in the Territory that, as Senator Walsh said, house and protect our national stories and culture. Labor's budget in October last year was the first step in cleaning up the budget mess that had been left behind by the former government. A mess left by a tricky former government that deceptively trapped the budget with $4.1 billion worth of fiscal traps and funding cliffs for essential programs and zombie measures. Since then, we've only uncovered more evidence of these traps, these funding cliffs for programs that Australians rely on and treasure. We've also uncovered chronic underinvestment in the key cultural institutions that Australians treasure and are actually crumbling around us, literally crumbling. And those opposite did nothing. Those collecting institutions are there to make sure that the most precious items of the Australian story are kept safe, are kept publicly available and are kept safe forever. But the previous government did not intend to keep these precious items safe or intact forever. The previous government only intended to care for them until June the 30th this year. What did they then do after that, I wonder? Just let the gallery sink into the lake, let the tarp on the roof of the gallery just stay there forever flapping in the breeze, on the library, I should say. Additional funding runs out for the Maritime Museum on the 30th of June, for the Portrait Gallery on the 30th of June, for the National Museum on the 30th of June, for the Bundanoon Trust on the 30th of June, for the National Film and Sound Archive on the 30th of June, for the National Gallery on the 30th of June, for the National Library on the 30th of June and for Old Parliament House on the 30th of June. And then we have other programs which I no doubt will come to in my next answer to one of Senator Walsh's excellent questions.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh, first supplementary. Order on my left. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. And I was very pleased to visit the National Library with Senator White, who took a group of us there last Monday. It is truly amazing. Minister, how would the former government's tricky approach to budgeting have put Australia's online treasure trove at risk?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for advocacy for Trove, and it is a program that I have received significant representations on since taking on the role of the Finance Minister. Trove is one of the Australian Government's most visited online services, with more than 50,000 visits a day, and yet again, like the list that I went through before, was chronically starved of funds by the Coalition. Australians from every state and territory use Trove to research and find their family history, and it's a tool that helps Australians to get to know themselves better. But not only does Trove attract more than 50,000 visits a day, it's got over 1,500 digitised newspaper titles and 900 partner institutions. But under the Coalition's proposal, their arrangements, it would run out of funding on the 30th of June this year, leaving thousands of Australians unable to research family history, undertake that important work, a job. But this is what we are uncovering line by line as we work through the former government's budget.
Order across the chamber. Senator McAllister. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Minister, as more Australians operate their daily lives online, the role of the e-Safety Commissioner is becoming even more crucial. Can the minister outline to the Senate how the former government's approach to this government agency would have left Australians more at risk online, and how the Albanese Labor government will take a different approach?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister.
Well, again, thank you, Senator Walsh, and I understand why those opposite don't like this, because we're calling them out for the way that they put their budget together.
Minister Gallagher, please resume your seat. Order. Order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. We're calling them out for the way that they put their budget together, which was these terminating measures, fund things for a year, don't fund things properly,
Order.
have a fiscal cliff and leave it for someone else to worry about. Just like in energy policy and all those other areas, actually kick the can down the road and actually let somebody else deal with it. Well, I'll take the interjection from Senator Birmingham. We started cleaning up the mess in October. $4.1 billion. We started cleaning up the mess, and we'll continue it in this budget with all dealing.
Minister Gallagher, Minister Farrell.
Point of order, President. I can't even hear the minister's answer, and I'd like the opportunity to hear her very fine answers to these issues.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. I ask the minister to resume her seat because there is too much disorder in the chamber, particularly the front bench on the left side, but not only there. I would ask senators, all senators, to listen respectfully and silently. Minister Gallagher, please continue.
Thank you. And on the important e-safety, Commissioner, their base funding of $10.3 million has never been increased since it was established in 2015, and it's facing a fiscal cliff of $23.3 million from the 30th of June this year. This is how they budgeted. They were budget vandals, and we're cleaning up the mess.
The time has expired. Senator David Pocock, first question.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister. In recent years, we've seen scandals across the public service, robo-debt, mismanagement of procurement and home affairs, continual blowouts in defence projects and the recent questionable contracts in Service Australia and the NDIA. Now there is a change in government. Is this government, and please for the answer, this government, not the last government, satisfied that the ANAO has an adequate budget to ensure Commonwealth departments operating legally and ethically?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Pocock, for his interest in this issue. And he has gone through in some significant detail all of the scandals that all of the scandals that beset the previous government. Of course, the budget for the ANOA, of course, ANAO is going to be the subject of budget discussions, and of course, you'll know in a very short period of time what the budget position will be for all of these organisations. But can I say, I've had some dealings with the organisation, and of course we saw through the Sports Rorts organisation the good work that they did. Since coming to office, I've had responsibility, Senator Pocock, for the PEMS system, and the PEMS system was supposed to computerise the way in which, for instance, our travel allowance payments were made. We discovered very quickly on coming to office.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Pocock.
Sorry, point of order, President. Relevance. My question was about the ANAO, not the PEMS system.
Thank you, Senator Pocock. The minister has referred to the ANAO, but I'll remind him of your question. Thank you. Minister Farrell.
The point of reference, referencing the, if you'd let me finish my question, Senator Pocock, the point of reference of the PEMS system is that I have asked the organisation to investigate why it is that a project that was meant to simplify and speed up the way in which these payments were made has not done that, and continues to cost
Thank you, Minister.
Australian
the time
public
for answering has
millions
expired. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister. Has the government been approached by the Auditor-General or any ANAO executive to request additional funding?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
I've certainly had some, not directly from them, but the government certainly had representation.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Pocock, for his first supplementary question. These are, of course, issues that the Finance Minister, of course, is particularly concerned with, and my understanding is that she has received some representations in this regard. Of course, that wouldn't be unsurprising, because in the lead up to the preparation for a budget, of course, all of these issues will no doubt be considered by not only the Finance Minister but, of course, the Treasurer in the preparation for the budget that's coming up in May.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. It's my understanding that the ANAO has completed just 16 out of 42 reports for this financial year, so that means there are 26 to be completed in the next 3 months. Outside of the budget process, in principle, does the Labor government support fully funding the ANAO to ensure that it can undertake its vital task in our democracy?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Pocock for his second supplementary question. Look, of course, we in opposition relied very heavily on the work that the ANOA did. I know ANAO, yep, did in opposition. Of course, they did have the resources to do very thorough investigations, and of course, we saw the results of the sports rorts investigations and the scandal that was associated with that, which regrettably cost Senator McKenzie her ministry. But look,
Order across the chamber. Order across the chamber. Order across the chamber. Senator Smith, I'm not sure the minister has concluded. I will check. Minister Farrell, have you concluded your answer?
I think I have run out of
Time's
time.
Up. Thank you. Senator Dean Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is also to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. The February 2023 Tax Expenditures and Insights Statement reveals $67 billion of franking credits was distributed by Australian companies in 2019-2020. Can the Minister tell the Senate how many billions of these funds from franking credits went to Australian charities and non-profits, and how many charities were the beneficiaries of this important and necessary franking credit income?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Smith for his question. I personally don't have the breakdown of franking credits that went to the organisations that you referred to. But I am happy to make some inquiries to see whether or not that information can be broken down or does exist in some place, so that I can come back to you with an appropriate answer to your question.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
First supplementary indeed. Can the Minister explain to the Senate then how the government's changes to franking credits will apply to the income-earning investment of charities?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Smith for his first supplementary question. My understanding of this issue is that there is no change, but I will follow that up with the Finance Minister to confirm that is the case. I do say this, that given that we are fortunate in the Senate to actually have the Finance Minister present, then of course these questions might be better directed towards the Finance Minister, and that would save me having to come back with answers to you. But can I suggest that it might be more appropriate in the future that those sorts of questions be directed to the Minister who is responsible for them?
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Noting that Senator Farrell is the leader of the government in the Senate, and this is the government's policy, the national charities sector is fighting to meet unprecedented demand because of the Albanese government's mismanaged cost of living crisis. How much will your franking credits broken promise cost Australian charities?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Smith for his second supplementary question. I completely reject the accusation in your question that the issues that charities are dealing with at the moment have anything to do with the policies of the Labor government. It's this Labor government that's putting that downward pressure on the cost of living. How many times in the last week and a half?
Order.
Have I explained the downward pressure that we are putting on things like electricity price? How many times?
Minister Farrell.
How many times have I talked?
Please resume your seat. Order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. They don't want to listen. They don't want to listen to all of the things. They don't want to listen to the ways in which this government is putting downward pressure. And,
thank you,
and
Minister.
that ought
the
to
time
be,
for answering has expired. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Skills and Training. TAFE teachers in Tasmania are paid $60,000 a year at the moment, but the tradies who should be teaching these apprentices earn upwards of $100,000. Last week, when I asked about Tasmanian TAFEs using Cold War-era Soviet Union equipment to teach electrician apprentices, the Minister representing the Minister of Defence said, and I quote, "We have revitalised the TAFE industry in this country," end quote. How does the government explain how a TAFE operating on Cold War equipment has been revitalised since you've been in government in 9 months?
Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Lambie. I can assure you, Senator Lambie, that in the Albanese government, you have a government that is an incredibly strong supporter of our TAFE system. And that is a contrast to what we have seen over the last 10 years, where we saw a government ideologically opposed to the public provision of vocational education and training. And if you needed any evidence of that, all you needed to do was look at I think it was $4 billion that was ripped out of the TAFE system by the former government until just before the election they realised they had a political problem and started throwing a few extra dollars at it. So there is no doubt that in your home state of Tasmania, in my home state of Queensland and in every state and territory across the country, our TAFE system has paid the price for being starved of resources for nearly 10 years by a Liberal and National government that was ideologically opposed to it. And I take the interjection from, I'm not quite which saw opposition senator trying to blame state governments. Well, you'd be talking about a Liberal state government in Tasmania, so I'm not quite sure how that helps your argument. But Senator Lambie, I agree with you that our TAFEs do need more investment.
On my left.
They do need more investment when it comes to capital equipment. They do need more investment when it comes to teachers' wages. They do need more investment when it comes to places for TAFE, and that's exactly why the Albanese government went to the election with a commitment to do so, and I think it was out of the Jobs and Skills Summit, we committed to provide 180,000 new fee-free TAFE places in skills that are in demand. I'm sure a considerable portion of them flow to your state of Tasmania, but this is an ongoing job. Again, unfortunately, this is one of the various messes that we have inherited from the former government. It will take time to repair, but at least we now have a government in Australia that is philosophically committed to our TAFE system and making it the centre of our vocational education and training system.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Don't worry, I'm coming for the Tasmanian State Government over this. Due to significant cuts by the previous government, Australia has lost the capacity to train apprentices. We all know that. Every year we've had fewer and fewer apprentices entering the workforce. Electrical apprentices in Tasmania are practising wiring equipment that isn't up to code. How does this government hope to achieve its housing policy and build much-needed homes in Tasmanians with so few apprentices in the construction industry?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thanks, Senator Lambie. And again, Senator Lambie, I agree that our TAFE system has been starved of resources for far too long, and that this is something that we do need the current federal government to be committed to, which is exactly what we are. I might say, Senator Lambie, I have a personal interest in this now, with having a Year 11 son who's undertaking a school-based apprenticeship in the construction trades, and I want to make sure that he gets the same sort of opportunities that you're looking for kids in Tasmania to get as well when they're considering trade careers. As I mentioned, our government is investing significantly in the VET and TAFE system. In fact, we're investing $921.7 million over 5 years from 2022-23 to strengthen our VET system and address skill shortages. That includes $864.6 million over 5 years to provide the fee-free TAFE places that I was talking about, as well as significant funding in infrastructure and technology to support our TAFEs as well.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. I was just wondering if you could tell me how much money, if you have passed over any money to the state of Tasmania since you have been in government, how much has actually been allocated to our TAFE system for its revitalisation, and how much money has actually been spent, if you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lambie.
Thanks, Senator Lambie. I might need to come back to you with the precise figures, but what I do have to hand is the funding that's been provided to each state and territory under the new 12-month National Skills Agreement that we negotiated with the states and territories last year. The figures that I have here are that for that 12-month agreement, the Commonwealth contribution to Tasmania is $13.5 million. The bulk of that is in those fee-free TAFE places. I'm pretty sure, Senator Lambie, that this would be the new funding that's being provided in addition to whatever existing funding there was in place. But $13.5 million in total from the Commonwealth, of which $9.9 million is for fee-free TAFE places, $0.5 million for student support, $0.6 million for data infrastructure, $2.5 million for the TAFE Tech Fund Tranche 1, and we would expect that as time goes on that additional funding will be increased because, as I've said, the Albanese government understands that the TAFE system is the centre of our training system.
Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Senator Polley, first question.
President, my question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. The 2023 Why Australia report launched today reinforces why there is no better place in the world to do business than in Australia. How does the Australian government plan to attract further international investment, and will this investment create more Australian jobs?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Polley. This is the second question from Tasmanian Senator today, and I know you've got a great interest in this area. The Albanese government has a simple message for international investors: we are open for business. And today's release of the Why Australia report highlights this fact. Our strong economy, talented workforce, renewable energy resources and open trade and investment policies make Australia one of the best places to do business in the world. Australia's reputation as an open, stable and globally connected economy makes us a leading destination for innovative startups, research organisations and global investors. Investors are fuelling our growing technology sector, which is valued at over $167 billion, and the third largest contributing sector to our GDP. Our supportive innovation ecosystems help spawn incredible innovations like Google Maps, Wi-Fi, the black box flight recorder, and of course the terrific cochlear implant. And our growing skilled workforce means Australia is in an ideal place for international companies to expand their operations. But our government wants to go even further. We have an ambitious plan to become a renewable energy superpower and a nation that makes things again. These plans will help attract even more international investment here to Australia. More high-quality international investments mean more and higher-paying jobs here in Australia, more jobs in the industries of the future and in regional Australia. Unlike the previous government, Australian jobs are a top priority for the Albanese Labor government. And I call on all of those opposite to support our legislation to strengthen the safeguards mechanism.
Senator Polley, first supplementary.
Yes, President. Minister, how has the last decade of policy uncertainty and inaction under the former Liberal National government impacted international business investment in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Polley for her first question. The Albanese Labor government knows that the international investors crave certainty. But unfortunately, after a decade of Liberal National government, that's the last thing international investors got. Instead of a government that they could trust, they got a decade of infighting and political divisions which prevented any meaningful action on important matters impacting investment, like a plan to tackle climate change. Thankfully, our government is taking a responsible approach to policy that delivers what investors need most: certainty and stability. We've ended the climate wars by charting a sensible path to net zero through our safeguards legislation. This gives international businesses a clear and predictable framework to invest in the renewable industries of the future.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Polley, second supplementary.
President, how would cross-party support for the safeguards mechanism and the National Reconstruction Fund give business certainty to help attract game-changing investment in Australia's domestic industries?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Polley for her second supplementary question. We're providing Australian industry and the economy with a stable, ambitious policy environment for investment in decarbonisation of our domestic industries. Yesterday's announcement by the Prime Minister and the Energy Minister was welcomed by the Business Council of Australia and the Australian Industry Group, because they know our safeguards mechanism policy will help us attract game-changing investment into the future. Beyond providing certainty on emissions, we are providing certainty on government investment in the industries of the future through the $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund. If senators in this place are serious about attracting international investment in the industries of the future, I encourage them to support our legislation for a stronger safeguards mechanism and the National Reconstruction Fund.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. Minister, have all of the 90 Bushmasters promised by Australia to Ukraine on the 8th of April and 27th October 2022 been delivered?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Van, for that question. Off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will make some inquiries after question time with the Defence Minister to get a confirmation of where we are on that issue. Australia, of course, has been very supportive of the not only the people of Ukraine, but the government of the Ukraine in this terrible fight that they now have with the Russians. I don't think outside of the NATO members there's been a stronger supporter of the people of Ukraine.
Oh, Minister Farrell. Thank you, Senator Van.
Minister, you know that's not true,
Senator
don't
Van,
you?
why
Point
are you
of
on
order
your feet?
is misleading the Senate.
That's not a point of order, Senator Van. Please resume your seat. Minister, did you wish to continue?
Yes, thank you, President. The significant scale of Australian military assistance means that we are still delivering items and will continue to do so over the coming months. For context, the scale of our support includes over 100 vehicles and heavy artillery. We've already flown more than 30 C-17s and Ukrainian Antonovs flights with assistance from Australia. Delivering items from the other side of the world, of course, as you might appreciate, is an immense logistical effort, but this government is prepared to continue to do that. Of course, one of the first things that our Prime Minister did on becoming Prime Minister was visit Kiev and visit the President of Ukraine.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Van, first supplementary.
Minister, what promised Australian assistance, military assistance, for Ukraine remains outstanding?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Farrell.
Senator Van, I'm very happy to consult with the Defence Minister after question time and get an answer for you on that question. But can I say this, as I started to say before, the people of Ukraine, the government of the Ukraine, have no greater supporters than the Australian government and the Australian people. We have demonstrated, both through the visits that our Prime Minister has made to Ukraine and by the ongoing military and other forms of support, that we continue to deplore the actions of the Russian government under Putin, and we continue to ensure that we support the people of Ukraine.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Van, second supplementary.
Minister, given Australia's proven ability to previously manage diplomatic representation in difficult environments like Kabul and Baghdad, will the government reopen our embassy in Kiev?
Thank you, Minister Farrell.
Thank you. Thank you, President, and thank you, Van. The situation in Ukraine remains extremely complex and challenging. In light of rigorous safety and security assessments, the Embassy continues to operate remotely from Warsaw. DFAT is keeping this decision under review. The Embassy is managing Australia's interests effectively in Warsaw, including the provision of consular services. There's nothing that we will do that seeks to politically influence this decision.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestries, Senator Watt. Minister, we know that low wages was a deliberate design feature of the previous Liberal government's economic architecture. But it also turns out that funding cliffs was also a design feature of the previous government.
Order.
Minister, could you please explain to the Senate why it is also important to provide long-term funding certainty for essential biosecurity services and how this protects our $76 billion agricultural export trade?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you very much, Senator Ciccone. Well, you would think that it goes without saying that providing funding certainty for essential government functions like biosecurity is a core government responsibility. And you would think that, and certainly the Albanese government gets that. We understand that you need to protect the Australian agriculture industry from biosecurity threats that could wipe out our production and exports and drive up grocery costs for Australians. And that's because we are a responsible government. Biosecurity is critical for the future of the regions and our $76 billion agricultural export trade. Strong biosecurity means our farmers can get their produce into overseas markets, building economic resilience and creating tens of thousands of jobs in our regions. In our first budget, the Albanese government invested $134 million in new biosecurity measures like extra frontline staff, 20 new detector dogs and stronger defences against foot and mouth disease and other emerging threats. Unfortunately, though, as we keep hearing, the Albanese government also inherited a series of budget booby traps left by a government that was all announcement and no delivery. Short-term funding in emergency management, in health, the arts, communications, national security and now biosecurity as well. The Liberals and Nationals were addicted to announcing programs that they didn't get around to funding. As we keep hearing, their record of providing short-term funding for essential services like biosecurity was appalling. Because of the member for Maranoa's incompetence and Senator McKenzie before him, biosecurity funding falls off a cliff over the next 2 years. In fact, it falls by 20% on the 30th of June this year and another 25% on the 30th of June next year. That's right, the funding engineered by Senator McKenzie and Mr Littleproud falls off a cliff by more than 40% in 2 years. We are cleaning up the mess by the Liberals and Nationals in biosecurity because that's what good governments do.
Has expired. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister, for that answer. It's quite shocking to learn about that development. We know that strong biosecurity is good for Aussie farmers, important for food security and essential for trade. Minister, could you please outline to the Senate the risks to regional Australia of making short-term funding decisions for essential biosecurity services?
Minister Watt.
Ciccone, I'd be delighted to. And there are risks. There are severe risks to our biosecurity, our agricultural industry and grocery prices as a result of these short-term funding decisions that were made for biosecurity as there were in so many other areas. It's no wonder, with the former government's record around short-term terminating measures for biosecurity, that the National Farmers Federation consistently called out the coalition for their failure to deliver sustainable biosecurity funding. But of course, rather than listen to our peak farming organisation and actually deliver, the Nationals leader David Littleproud resorted to name-calling, labelling the NFF ignorant and sideline critics. Fortunately, in the Albanese government, the adults are in charge. We are working with our farmers and we are working with our agriculture sector to fix our biosecurity system once and for all. In addition to the investments we made in our first budget, we're laying the foundations on traceability, something that was too hard for the National Party, to deliver a fit-for-purpose modern system to protect our livestock industries.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
Thank you again, and thank you, Minister, for that answer. Funding for biosecurity, it's fair to say, was left in a complete mess by the former Liberal National government. Complete mess. What happens when governments don't plan for the future by making long-term investments in essential biosecurity? I'd appreciate your thoughts on that, Minister.
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. And of course, we did begin the job of fixing up this mess in our October budget, but of course, it is so big that it's going to take even longer. Because we know that the Liberals and Nationals announced programs but didn't even fund them, even on issues important to their own constituencies.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Order on my left. Minister Watt, please continue.
President, the Liberals and Nationals announced programs but didn't even fund them, even on issues important to their own constituencies like biosecurity. And when you don't make long-term biosecurity investments, you leave Australia's farmers and our agriculture industry at risk.
Senator McGrath.
Now, I was very noticed and I was very concerned to read an article just this week or in the last few days from ABC reporter Kath Sullivan, which reported that Australia's sniffer dogs haven't been sniffing for queen bees and were not on the beat when the deadly varroa mite arrived last year. Now, why would that be? Well, you go on to read in the article for several years the then government had stopped training sniffer dogs to detect queen bees that might carry the varroa mite. That is the legacy of the coalition government. That is the risk that they were prepared to put biosecurity to because of this terminating measures that we are having to fix up.
Your time has expired. Senator Farrell.
Thank you, President. I regrettably ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.